Welcome, everyone. It's great to see you. I know that you can see there's a place for questions and answers. We have a number of panelists with us tonight who are behind the scenes collecting questions. As I go through the presentation, we're going to do our best to answer as many questions as possible after I get through my presentation tonight. We noticed on Wednesday night we had questions that were a lot alike, so we grouped them together. So if you're, and we'll try to answer in a way that answers all the questions. We had a number of questions about lunchrooms, and so we grouped those together to try to talk about lunchrooms. So with that, I want to do a quick introduction to our panelists. We do have one of our school board directors here tonight. Director Karina Guzman-Ortiz is with us tonight. Welcome to Director Ortiz. Great to have you here. We also have panelists, Assistant Superintendents Ethan Udosnata and Assistant Superintendent Olga Cobb, our Director of Safety and Risk Management, Chris Baldridge, Jody Peterson, our Coordinator of Health Services Manager, Barbara Svensson, our Special Education Coordinator, Cynthia Richardson, our Director of Equity, and Sandy Price, our Director of School Improvement. And again, they'll be behind the scenes collecting your questions. If you don't get your question answered tonight, we are also releasing a survey with a place to ask questions. We'll begin collecting those for our community engagement back to school sessions in a couple weeks. And we'll also start some frequently asked questions on our website. Another great place to get your questions answered is to call your school. We have all of our administrators and office staff back and ready to answer questions and hear from you. So with that, welcome. We are so excited to be back to school. And the place I want to start is for you to hear my commitment, our commitment to 5 days a week of in-person instruction. Well, we know, given that we have been in hybrid, we've had lots of kids in limited in person. We know that we can do this safely. And our goal is 5 days a week of in-person instruction and keeping kids in school. So we're going to do everything we can to add layers of protection. So when you get your kids in school 5 days, they stay in school 5 days. That's our goal. And that's going to be the commitment and the goal that I know I'm going to ask the community to help support us in. We know that the Delta variant is striking our community, and from our health experts, we've learned that the Delta variant is very contagious, but we do know that we can do this safely. As you have likely known, the governor has directed state agencies to align the K-12 mask guidance with the CDC recommendation to prevent disruption to in-person instruction. Remember, that's the goal: get our kids in person, keep them in person. So we are required by Oregon Health Authority through a temporary rule to have face coverings on in school. We also have extended this to the adults when you're in our departments or facilities or our schools to also wear face coverings, because we know that while vaccinations are the most important tool in stopping the spread, that the face coverings really help with the contagiousness of especially the Delta variant. So our goal is to ensure that every student is able to, in Oregon, is able to attend school in person every day. I'm seeing this from the highest levels of the state because there's lots of worries about if we get kids back, do we just have to go back to CDL? I don't see anyone that wants to make any decision other than 5 days a week. All the other decisions, though, are to help protect us, to keep us in school. And we have to remember that schools are a required place for students to attend. So it's a congregate setting where COVID-19 can spread easily if we don't have the layers of protections. So people ask me, why don't we mask up in the grocery store right now? Well, going to the grocery store is a choice. Going to school, we all want our kids, all of them in school. We do know the governor's making the same requirement of state employees. And we also know that our hospitals are starting to fill up again. I would be remiss right now if I didn't do a huge shout out to our healthcare professionals in the community. You've been on the front lines of COVID for the entire pandemic. And what we know is that especially our hospital workers are tired. And I want you to know that our goal is to do in Salem-Keizer School District is to do everything we can to stop the spread so that as our hospitals fill up, you're able to care for the most ill patients. So thank you again to our healthcare workers. The other thing we know about schools and the reason for the mask is that we're mostly unvaccinated settings. And if I could just have us go back to that slide I was on previously, they are unvaccinated settings. And we know that the universal and correct use of face coverings can keep students learning in person by reducing the infection. I've been thinking a lot about this because I know as a community, there's lots of feelings on both sides of the face covering issue. And what I want to say is I would hope that as a community, we can come together and show love and care for each other, space and grace, and know that in our school setting, we have lots of unvaccinated individuals. We have people that are staff and students that are medically compromised. And we also know that our kids or adults go home to places that they might live in intergenerational families. There might be people in their household who can't be vaccinated for a number of reasons, or have some big immune compromised systems. So while it feels like an inconvenience, I'm not right now, I don't love putting my mask back on, but I am doing it because I believe in the public health situation that we're in and our ability to do everything we can to have layers of protection is how I will show my love and care for the community, because I don't know everyone's situation. So I appreciate that. I appreciate our parents who are helping the kids understand that this is where we are, because the bigger, more important thing right now is 5 days a week of in-person instruction and getting kids in school and keeping them in school. We know what our kids have lost, and we know how important it is to both their academics and their mental health to see kids and to see each other and to be in school. So with that, I'll go on to the next slide and I'll talk about where are the places we won't have face coverings. So face coverings are required indoors and on school buses. Face coverings are not required outdoors. So when our kids go out to recess, that is the time they get to see each other without face coverings. We will have some places where medical or disability accommodations need to happen for kids on a case-by-case basis. We had some kids return in during hybrid that their individual education plan was clear that they could not wear face covering. So we know that there are some for special accommodations who can't. And it says on the slide that we're still waiting on the indoor athletic guidance, but I'll share with you what the direction is on that in the next slide. As kids eat lunch, we won't have face coverings on. Anytime they're outdoors, they won't have face coverings on, but we do know it's one of the layers of protection that can keep our kids in school safely, so we're not keep going back to online. We will keep at least 3 feet of distance whenever possible. We will still have increased hand washing and access to hand sanitizer. I think that's the way of the future for us. Next slide, please. We will continue to maximize the outdoor air that comes into our schools and increase airflow. We started this last summer, and we opened up the outdoor air vents and a part of our heating, ventilation, and cooling systems in order to bring in more air. we will keep that up. Our custodians, who, again, I would be remiss if I didn't do a shout out to our custodial crew, who's been on cleaning duty since always, but also in the pandemic, who will be sure that our buildings are clean and disinfected per our daily protocols. And as a reminder, and I'm trying to make myself slow down so I can give our interpreters just a little break here. But as a reminder, vaccinations is recommended as the #1 option to end the pandemic. And as Salem-Keizer, we are going to continue to partner with Salem Health and Marion County and Polk County, who have been amazing health partners with us, to keep having vaccination clinics. So I saw a couple more pop up on our social media feed as places our community can get vaccinations. One of the questions that came up, I think, on Wednesday night was, do we know, have we heard any more about when we'll have vaccinations for 12 and under? We don't know any more than you know. I think our nurse manager, Jody, has heard a little bit about fall, late fall, winter, but we don't know any more than you know. So about our sports, we have started practices this week. The good news in the fall is that we have, and if I go on the next slide, if we could, we know that we've got outdoor practices for the most part going on. And last meeting, I put, this is where I think we'll land. This is what our decision is at this time. Indoors, face coverings are required of all athletes and coaches when not engaged in vigorous activity. So our teams, when they're conditioning, we want them to take their face coverings off, but we're asking everyone else to show up and do their part to wear face coverings indoor during athletics. Outdoors, of course, face coverings are not required at all. The other places that we won't be able to have face covering, we do have musical instruments playing that happens. We want our kids playing in the band. So they wouldn't wear face coverings then. So there are a few times during the school day that you can't do a face covering for the academic. The other question that came up was, are we going to resume with clubs and athletics and music competitions? The answer is yes. We know that the most important thing we can do is to have our students involved, not only in the school day, but outside of the school day. So we know that's our highest priority. And we are really excited to see our kids on stage in performance. We're excited to see the art our kids create. We're decided to return to the things that make school fun, like jogathons. We're just really trying to have layers of protection that can be around us so we can have a more normal school experience. So thank you to our parents and families, first and foremost, for all of the work that you did when we were in CDL. And then when we switched to hybrid, you've been incredibly flexible and patient. I understand why as parents you would be frustrated at all of last year because of the situation we were all thrown in together. But I have to say, I continued to be so proud of and thrilled with how our parents showed up and our educators as well, that we all, I think, became better partners to do all what's right for kids. And I know that as we enter this time, we're still entering with uncertainty, I know, but I want you to hear again our commitment to 5 days a week of in-person instruction, to have as many layers of protection that will keep us safe and healthy, and our neighbors and families and friends safe and healthy. And when kids get to school, to keep them in school. That's got to be our highest goal right now. With that, I think we'll begin to open up to a few questions. There is a Q&A button. I already see that we've got lots of questions going on in the chat. So I'll ask our assistant superintendents to begin sharing questions with our panelists. And as they're doing it, I'm going to give, let's just take like a minute to transition so our interpreters get a quick little breather on the other side.
Okay, I'll start. First question, good evening, everyone, is for maybe Mr. Baldridge. If you can help us with a question around kindergartners and speech teachers. Will we have any kind of see-through face coverings? Are those available at all?
Yes, and it's a great question. Thank you. So we heard our staff last year. We piloted some face coverings with our speech language pathologists, and what they are is a clear anti-fog face covering that shows the mouth and the tongue and everything that kids need to see. And so my partner in custodial services, Director Dave Hughes, is underway right now identifying a vendor, and we intend to purchase those for all staff.
Thank you. And Emily, is it better if we quit sharing screens so people can see the panelists?
I think,
Since we've got quite a bit of time for questions.
yeah.
All right, next question.
Next question is about Edge. Is Edge still an option for families that wish to not have their students wear masks? Can we transfer between Edge and in-person throughout the year?
So I'll go ahead and take that one. We have still been collecting Edge enrollment. Right now, when you enroll, you're immediately placed on a waiting list. There isn't a lot of room on the waiting list right now, but we do also have a few Edge families who, because they've seen that we're opening up now, are asking to transfer back. So we're allowing transfers for people who have signed up to Edge back to their home school for the start of the school year if interested, in order to allow families, if there is room in Edge. So the window's closed, but if you're interested, enroll, we'll get you on the list. There's little room in some places, and I think that will evolve over the coming weeks. If you make a decision for Edge, let's say that the mask mandate is lifted in 30 days, 60 days, because we know that the governor's office is going to look at it in 30-day increments. So let's say at the beginning of November, the mask mandate is lifted. We aren't going to allow transfer back into homeschools except at a normal transition period. So end of semester, a grading time for elementary, and we'll publish those. So what we are asking, if you really want in person, we would love you to stay in your home school, even with a mask. If for whatever reason you can't do that and you get into Edge, no, there'll only be certain times of the year that you can transfer back. We staffed Edge to a certain level, and we staffed them a little above what our initial enrollment was. So we'd have this room, very little, to have some adjustments for families during the summer. But we aren't going to raise the enrollment window because it requires then a transfer of staff. So if we have kids going back and forth all year, we can't ask our staff to transfer back and forth, in part because it's not an easy, 30 kids from first grade at Brush College, all transfer to one place and then back. It's usually spread throughout the system. So we appreciate your patience on that. If you're really interested, get on the list, and we're going to work through those as quick as we can to help families make decisions in the coming days.
Thank you. We have a question for our district health authority. Jody, what is the threshold of community spread that would prevent in-person school?
Yeah, so that has actually changed over the course of learning about the pandemic. But that guidance and recommendations will come from the Oregon Health Authority, and also from the local public health authorities and ODE that instills our rules. So we definitely know that there's times of higher infection rates than others, but currently we don't have any guidance on that. And hopefully, like Christy Perry said, that we will be in school 5 days and working through all the protocols that we currently have.
Can I add to that? So when this all first kicked off, the district made a significant investment in a team that supports COVID-19 and the students as they come through school, as well as our staff. Pardon me. I lost my voice about 2 days ago. I don't really know why, but I did. So that group of folks has the ability that as COVID-19 starts to impact buildings, we start applying layers. We treat it in layers. So we start initially at a very low level, and then we start to elevate and move up. So you could see things from we're enhancing cleaning protocols. We're starting to change movements in hallways, or we're starting to ask schools to mind as the classrooms move, to keep certain groups away from others. So our ultimate goal as that group supporting the district and your student is to make sure that we keep them in that building, and we're keeping them as safe as we possibly can, and keeping as much COVID as we can out of the building. So we're able to react to these, and closing of a school is the absolute last resort for us. That is something that would be a very, very big decision that would be done with our executive team, the superintendent, our local public health authority, and our district health authority, which is our nurses.
And in hybrid and throughout summer, we've really demonstrated, and we haven't had to close down a summer camp. We didn't have to close down full schools in hybrid. So we feel really confident that we can do this.
And to extend on that, Superintendent Perry, there was a question that asked pretty bluntly, will we require students and staff to be vaccinated?
Yeah, I'll take that one. We don't have any requirements on the horizon for the COVID vaccination. So vaccination with the COVID vaccination, I personally don't see anything coming right now that would require that. Unfortunately, we know things can change, but Salem-Keizer has no plans to require vaccinations for adults, staff, or students. As a reminder, though, there are a number of school vaccinations that are required, not the COVID-19 one, but there are a number of school vaccinations that are required. We've had a lot of our kids miss them during the pandemic, and we will be starting to contact families about the traditional vaccinations, measles, chickenpox, mumps. And in February, that's the time that we really ramp up before we have to exclude kids from school, but not the COVID vaccination.
We have a question about ventilation. Maybe our Director of Safety and Risk. What plans are there for improving ventilation, especially through winter when the windows are less likely to be open?
Okay, I'm also going to ask the Chief Operations Officer, Mike Wolf, to jump on and help me with this, because he's a bit more of a ventilation expert than I am. I will do my best with this question. Here's what I can tell you that I've learned from our Director of Maintenance. So our systems are running at basically their max capacity right now, and they are exchanging air inside of those rooms. Many of the questions that we get around the air exchange is, but I can't feel it. And so I asked our maintenance teams about that, and they said, you shouldn't feel it, because if we're feeling that air, then all we're doing is stirring air. We're not pushing in clean air and drawing bad air out or old air out. So those systems will continue to run. They ran all summer long. They'll run during the winter. And largely, we don't open windows inside of schools. One, there's a safety issue with opening windows. And number two, it actually defeats the systems that we have in place. So we ask our teachers to, if they have a system that's functioning well, to leave those windows closed and let the system do its job.
Yeah, and I have to say, Chris, there's nothing I can add to what you just said. That was perfect. The only thing I would reinforce is that we're operating with as much outside air as our systems will handle at this point. And as the temperatures get colder, we have to be careful that we don't, freeze coils. But we will continue to monitor and pull in as much outside air as we can reasonably do so.
It's probably one thing to say. One thing I've noticed with as much air as we're moving in buildings is it does mess with the temperature a little bit. So bring in extra, have the kiddo throw a sweatshirt in there, because our rooms can get a little cold because how much air we're flowing. I get cold.
Thank you. I have a question that maybe Barbara Swenson, one of our coordinators for special education, can answer. How is the mask requirement going to be applied to students receiving special education or students with intellectual disabilities? Do they have to stay online?
Thanks, Olga. That's a great question. Our IEP teams have gotten really creative in working to support individual students' needs through the IEP, through goals and instruction and specific accommodations. So we look at each individual case and call an IEP team together, and that team helps us figure out how we can support students through wearing masks. Sometimes it's a little bit at a time, sometimes it's a little more practice, sometimes it's a little more instruction. So we've gotten really creative with that. It's been great to learn from all of our different schools this year, how each of them have come up with new ideas and creative solutions. And the answer to the question, do students have to stay online? No, absolutely not.
Thank you, Barb.
I have a follow-up question for our district health authority, Jody Peterson. What is the protocol when there's a positive case in the classroom? And will parents that are children that are exposed be notified, and how will they be notified?
Yes, that's a great question. So any student that has been in close contact with a positive communicable disease or COVID-19 case will be notified directly via phone from the health services nurse team. So it'll be a direct phone call for all exposures. If there is exposure, there can be a classroom informational communication. But definitely if there's close contact exposures, you will get a call. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to your building, or also each building has a nurse assigned, and you can reach out to your school health nurse.
Thank you. Superintendent Perry, I think maybe you can help us with this question. We have a few parents asking, are you going to mail us more information? What are the plans for communication on back to school?
Yeah, so we're doing these couple of community engagements this week, and then we will shift gears once we get survey questions and all that to our back to school communications. So the same ways we have been, which is remind our website, your schools will give you notice, we also do, gosh, I'm drawing a blank on that, email communication to you, the similar communication systems that we've had in the past for communicating with you. We will begin to push out lots of information about back to school. We're really committed to in languages as well, and then hoping to equip your schools to answer your questions as well. They'll start a number of back to school things that you'll see directly from your school. And as we all know, our parents and families, hearing stuff from the people that are in your schools is often reassuring. So we'll begin getting out in a variety of mediums I do want to alert people, and I don't know if we can drop it into the communications tonight, but we do have a new product that eventually will replace Remind called Parent Square. And it will give us much more versatility than the auto dialer system. So we're going to try to integrate all of that, not right now, but we're hopeful that by the end of September, beginning of October. So we'll begin pushing information out about that as well.
I have a question. I hope I'm not going out of order. I don't remember if I asked last one or Olga. I have a question about attendance policy. Will students be penalized if they have to have excessive absences due to COVID illness or any other illnesses?
Right. Well, we're going to do our best not to penalize. So, because what we also want to encourage is if kids are sick, they stay home. We are coming off of a cold and flu season that was almost non-existent. So because so many people were at home, because of face coverings, we didn't have near as much cold and flu. And so we're even forecasting the cold and flu season. So definitely, if your kids are sick, keep them home. It is why we want to stress hand washing, and then call in with an excuse to make sure the school knows your child is sick, and we'll do excused absences like we have in the past. If we have to exclude because of COVID, if we have to send quarantine, again, we'll work hard to get work to our students. The good thing is we've got our learning management systems that we had last year, Seesaw and Canvas. Seesaw for our younger kids, Canvas for grades 4 and older. And so we'll be able to utilize those learning management systems for absences as an organizer for our students and their families. That's one of the good things that's come out of COVID.
I have a question about physical distancing. How will social distancing be maintained in a classroom of over 25 students? Maybe Mr. Baldridge?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we embarked kind of on a project at the end of the last school year where we went into our classrooms and we mocked up mini classrooms. So we went into our buildings, our newer things, and we just looked, is this going to work? And I can tell you that it does. So we're able to get the desks in there with the 3-foot spacing. And then as far as the monitoring goes and those types of things, our teachers do great with that stuff. They do an amazing job, and the kids do a great job. And so really honestly, it's a kind of an all hands on deck type thing, but there's space inside the class.
And this question is for Superintendent Perry. What will lunch look like? Will kids be eating in cafeterias, and what may that look like?
Yes, so first of all, we're switching. We've been doing grab and go since the start of the pandemic, so much that I know our kids are sick of grab and go and are ready for some regular lunch. So we'll go back to regular breakfast. Often breakfast is either in the cafeteria, which we have plenty of room for breakfast in the cafeteria, or in their classroom. It depends on the school how they do that. Lunch will be back to a more regular lunch. We have elementary schools that are working on their schedules right now to see how many lunches they're going to need to have in a day. We are encouraging the 3-foot to the greatest extent possible, but our principals are in that planning time now. But we want to go back to a regular lunch type environment, especially so we can get away from our grab and go meals to a more regular hot lunch type situation. We will still have breakfast as well, so breakfast and lunch will be served.
Thank you. I have a question from a student in a high school. He's asking, will we be able to use lockers? What is the protocol to request a locker? And I have another comment from a high schooler saying there are a lot of things that I have to carry. Will lockers be available?
Yep. Lockers will be available. Yes, you can use them. And I believe that in your taking care of business or back to school days, your team at your high school will tell you how to get one of those. As I understand it, we have lockers for everyone, so it's not going to be a first come, first served basis. And if you are at, I know for sure North Salem and McNary, they've got some pretty nice new lockers that we've barely been able to use. So yes, our plan is that you can use your lockers this year. And I'm super thankful for that.
I have a question about volunteers for Superintendent Perry, or it could also be for Chris Baldridge, Director of Safety. Will volunteers be allowed in buildings?
Yeah, so we're starting the year with a stricter protocol around visitors, volunteers as little as possible, because we want to keep the schools in a place where we know who's there, have a kind of intact group in our community within that school, and to really practice all of our safety protocols, especially while we're in the middle of the Delta variant. So we're going to start out fairly tight on visitors and volunteers. Of course, if you are a parent who needs a meeting with a teacher, an IEP meeting, any of that, parent conferences, of course, we're letting adults in the building for that. Our hope is that at a future date, we can begin to relax that standard and we get and know our safety protocols are going to work. Because here's the thing, we know that our parents are some of our best volunteers and really help in the academic learning for our kids. So our goal is to get there, just not yet.
Thank you. Jody, we have a follow-up for our health authority, Jody Peterson. We have a follow-up question. A couple of parents are asking, how is close contact defined? Can you explain what constitutes a close contact for exposure?
Yes, because that has actually just changed in the guidance that we found. So this is great information for us and how we can have more students in a space. So close contact is now defined by 3 to 6 feet. So as low as 3, as close to possible as that 3 foot. And with our tools that we have, hand washing, face coverings, all of our strategies, and that 3 feet or greater at the best extent possible, there would not be considered exposure. So if we do start seeing illness, that will change our pattern, of course, but that exposure period and distancing has changed this last set of guidance. Also, if you're fully vaccinated and it's been 14 days since your last dose, you're not required to quarantine. So that is all information that for you guys.
I'm going to add a follow-up. I've started in the last several weeks following, I think she's called an Olga, you might be able to find it and put it in. It's called your local epidemiologist. And it's a what I've liked about this person's writing was it's very accessible. So if you have some of those types of questions, her recent one was on the Delta variant and why it's so contagious and how the contagion rate for somebody that's vaccinated versus somebody that's unvaccinated is really high in the first 6 days. So I thought if you're somebody who likes to read that stuff, the local epidemiologist, I know that Ethan's put it in the chat feature for you, is very accessible and address some of those things as well.
I don't believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Emily, I'm not sure if parents have access to the chat that dropped in, so you can help make sure that that link gets to parents. That would be great, and families, that would be great. Yeah. I do have a question for the Director of Technology, Bob Silva. It's about Chromebooks. It's 2 parts. First, will Chromebooks be made available to students and issued to take home? And also, where does a parent go to return their child's Chromebook if they have one and no longer need it?
Sure. So grades 3 through 12 will be assigned a Chromebook for use during school as well as take home. Grades K through 2 will be assigned a Chromebook for use in the school building, and we're working on a different plan to implement in the fall for at-home devices for K2 students. Regarding where to turn in the device, you can turn it in at your local school or any school within the school district, or you can also turn it into the technology building at 1340 State Street in downtown Salem.
I have a question. Ready, Olga?
Go ahead.
You first, I insist.
Thank you. I have a question about open house. Will that be available this year? Any type of open house in schools? Will it be done over the course of different nights?
And Olga, I'm going to ask, I believe that yes, we will be having some open houses and back to school nights. And I've seen the advertisements for our secondary taking care of business days, back to school days. And is that your understanding at the elementary level as well?
It is. We will have kindergarten open house, kindergarten orientations, open house for all elementary students, and schools will be communicating soon with parents about schedules and times. And of course, we're going to all wear our face coverings during those times.
Yeah. One of the real important things that we care deeply about is how our kids re-enter into our schools in full-time instruction, and how we care and provide connection and give a space for the experience we've all just had over the past 15 months. So that's why some of these events of getting kids in schools, the care and connection in the classroom. For our kinders, we don't have a requirement to do the kindergarten readiness assessment this year. So our kinder teachers can just show up to get to know you and your child. And we're really emphasizing, both for staff, that care and connection, and for students, care and connection, as we then transition into academics. I had the chance to be in one of our early learning programs this week, and I was in the baby classroom, our infant classroom, and though it was on August 1st, and they had been off for a month, and there were a whole lot of tears in infant and toddler classrooms. And we know the same is going to be true for some of our kinders and some of our first graders who barely step foot in a school. So our job is to love on your kids, to bring them in, to care for them, to connect with them as we transition to school. And across many listening groups we did last year, both with kids and families, the one thing that our families and our students have told us over and over again is that the pathway to academics is more nuanced. It's just not about the academics. It's knowing that the adults in this care about you, know who you are, believe in you, and we're really going to focus on that as we enter this school year. And I think that the pandemic has taught all of us about that, and the importance of human connection and care for each other. So we will focus on that as well. If your kids have some transition anxiety, we'll work with you on that if it takes a little bit longer to, as you get your students oriented to school. And again, especially for our youngest learners, our pre-K, our kinders, our first graders, as they come back.
Okay, I have a question about lunches. Will lunches be free for kids this year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you were living in a school or school catchment area where there was previously free lunch, there will be lunch again. I think we have a couple of sites, and I don't have the list, but I do think we have a couple of sites that don't have a complete 100% free lunch program. But many of our sites do. And I'm gonna pass this question to Mike to see if he has a more specific answer on that, because he's oversees the food service program.
Yeah, thanks. No, you're right on, Superintendent Perry. the vast majority of our district is what's called the community eligibility program, which is 100% free for breakfast and lunch. We can get specific. We'll add the information. I think you're right. I think there are just 2 schools in the entire district that don't fall into that program. But free and reduced lunch applications are available at those locations as well.
We'll be sure to have our schools publish that. And while I'm on lunches, huge shout out again to our bus drivers who last year took the grab and go lunches into neighborhoods, and we're doing things that weren't normal for bus drivers, and also our food service program who really stretched their capacity. And we have served millions of grab and go breakfasts and lunches over the course of the pandemic. So Mike, huge shout out to food service and transportation team on that. And I just got a note here that Candelaria and Straub are the 2 schools that aren't right now full free, but we also are in the process that a few of them can change. So we'll get a full list out as soon as we have it finalized.
Thank you. I have a question about transportation, buses, and safety in buses. But before that, I wanted to mention that we have lots of notes in the Q&A about parents thanking the team for providing safe learning environment and lots of great information. And also a comment from a parent that feels more confident after having their student participate in summer school. Just wanted to mention that too. And then I'll ask the question, what about buses? Please tell us about physical distancing in buses. There's such small spaces and face coverings.
Yeah. So I'll start. Face coverings on the bus are required. That's a federal regulation. I think we will see that as long as we see face coverings on airplanes, because I think our school buses fall under that. So it's a federal requirement for face coverings. We do have the ability to do the 3 feet of physical distancing on a bus. Plus we can do some additional airflow on buses. And the good news is we do have a lot of kids who don't ride a long way to school. So we've demonstrated throughout the summer that we can do that safely on buses as well. And I do not believe we've had any major outbreaks on the buses over this summer school. And I'll check with Jody and Chris on that, but we've got a good plan in place with our buses as well. So did I speak truth there, Jody and Chris?
Yes, you spoke absolute truth. So a couple of other things too that are great about the bus. One, we can crack the windows. 2, they have really high seat backs, and so that's really nice for keeping your child seated in a chair there, and they've got their own little space to be apart. And there's a lot of air flowing on those buses. The other positive thing, if you remember last year, if you experienced this last year, is that if a COVID positive went on the bus under last year's rules, it sent the entire bus cohort home. And so we lost where we sent home a lot of kids who just rode the bus. And so now this year, in collaboration with our local public health authority, we're able to actually look at the bus, look at the distancing, where the child was seated at or where the staff member was seated at, and then quarantine based on spacing. And so there will be far less kids quarantined as a result of bus rides. So we're really excited about that. That's a huge change.
Also, one of the things we implemented during the pandemic that we'll ask you to watch for again is rider registration. We'll put out information if you haven't heard of it, but we do want you to sign up your kids for bus route riding, because that helps us know which kids are on the bus, know when they're seated. You don't have to worry about the seating arrangements. We do that. But also it helps us route efficiently. And one of the things that we know is that our bus transportation system is always, the more efficient we can route our students, the quicker we can get kids to school and get them there on time. And they're asking for a slowdown again of our presenters and our panelists.
Sorry. Well, I will also do this shamelessly since we have quite a large crowd. We need bus drivers and we are hiring bus drivers every day. And so if you know someone who would be a good fit for this, there are signing bonuses that are available. Please look at our website and fill out an application.
Yeah, we actually have a number of positions that are open. We're still looking for bus drivers, custodians, instructional assistants, teachers. And so it is a great time to come work for us. We have a good benefits package. There, how didn't I help that, Mr. Baldridge? All right, next question.
I know you already answered this question, but I'm wondering if maybe people logged in late and it's worthy of revisiting. It has to do with accommodating, how will we handle students who have medical conditions and wearing masks?
Yeah. So if your child has a medical condition, I'd like you to call your school. If you believe the medical condition prevents them from wearing masks, we do have to make some accommodations for that, which is why I believe the governor also mandated that anyone who can should mask up. So contact your school, even if your student isn't on an IEP, but might be on a 504, we'll have the nurses be in contact with you to walk through the medical condition. The other thing, I'll just, as we're getting close to 7, tell you that we're gonna work hard to get answered and get some FAQs. We've had a lot of questions in our community about curriculum. What do we teach? I want you to feel free to ask your child's teacher or schools about that. Because the things we're teaching haven't changed and we follow state standards for our health, social studies, language arts curriculum. And we didn't come, I don't know if there were questions tonight, but I know we had a few questions on Wednesday night that we didn't answer because this wasn't the space for curriculum questions. We'll do it. We can do another webinar. All right. Any other last minute questions, Ethan or Olga?
I think just a clarification maybe from Chris about face coverings and face shields. We have a couple of those. Can parents also wear face coverings that are mesh face coverings?
Yep. And I'm going to also add, if we could get the first days of school into the chat as well while Chris is answering. There's some beginning of school day questions.
Okay, so the requirement for a face covering as it's defined by the CDC is 2 layers of fabric, something that fits securely along the cheeks and can be secured, covers the nose and mouth effectively, right? So it's going to come here. Most of them drop below the chin. A lot of them come around the mask. So I'll talk about this. There are available mesh masks out there. Some of them are great. Some of them are not. If we ever questioned a kid or a child about one of the masks, it would be something, and I actually got some examples because I knew this question would come up. So it would be probably something that I hope you can see. Oh, my background's blurring me out there. It can look like this. This mesh mask has vents. You can see the vents here. They actually allow the air that it expels out of the face covering, right? So the face covering has vents or valves on them. That's when we would say, hey, we've got to do something different here because it's not doing what it's designed to do, and that's to tamp down or damper the effectiveness or the what you're exhaling. So again, 2 layers of cloth, preferably something that secures behind the ears or that stays up without your hands, covers your nose and your mouth down to the lower chin, and seals on the side. A face shield looks, well, it's not going to work because I have a background on. I'm sorry. A face shield is a plastic covering that goes from the forehead down below the chin and wraps around the side of the face. The difference with the face shield is it doesn't seal anything off. It just allows to breathe. So there are exceptions for face shields. Those most apply to students who are on IEPs or 504s. If you feel that your child needs to be in a face shield, please work directly with your school and we can assist with that. Is that good?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, other than you're still going too fast.
That was slow. I'm sorry.
The other thing is we got some questions on Wednesday night about if I haven't been able to purchase face coverings. We have so many face coverings, so do not worry if your child forgets. If they don't have one, we have them at school. We'll give them on the way in. So we have plenty. I know a lot of kids and families like their own, but again, if they forget, we'll have them there for them. We're not sending them home for school because they forgot a face covering. Lots of space and grace around this.
Sorry, Superintendent. And the neoprene ones, it's fine. They're thick. They're super thick. If it's still warm, please work with your kiddo because those get so hot so fast. So 2 layers of flat fabric, something thin that's breathable is really helpful.
We are, as we're winding up, we will collect the questions. Those we can answer that are, we'll answer. We will put out some frequently asked questions on our website, and we'll also weave that in our back to school. So like both nights, we've had lots of questions around lunchrooms. So we know that one of our back to school communications needs to be clear about lunchrooms. We've had lots of questions about if my child needs an accommodation, what do I do? We'll make sure and put information on that. So if there were some specific questions in the chat that we didn't get to, we'll pull those all and get a frequently asked questions document up on our website. Please don't hesitate to call your school. Our offices, if they don't have the answer, we'll find the answers. We've got lots of panelists here. People have emailed. There's a contact information on our website. We'll do our best to answer questions. The more clear you can be with the real question, that's helpful to us so we can answer quickly, or we'll pass them on to the people in the organization who can. So don't worry about getting to the right person. We'll get the right person to answer for you. Also, if you do email communication, if you can state your child's school, that also helps us because then we can help the school get the answer to you as well. All right, with that, thank you very much. Huge thank you to Cindy for being our interpreter tonight and our interpreters behind the scenes who scramble as we talk too fast. We appreciate them. To families and students who joined in tonight, thank you. We're really looking forward to having you back, our students back in person. For those of you that are going to one of our schools that have been under construction, especially South and McKay, that's going to be fabulous for you to walk back into those schools to see those. Our construction teams have done a great job this summer. So with that, we'll see you soon. I'm hopeful if you can stick a note in the chat. This was a helpful presentation style for you. We're thinking about some more panelist type events on different topics over the course of the year that I will host in the community. So with that, if you'd stick those notes in the chat quick, we appreciate you. Have a happy Friday night and a great weekend.